I was 16. Don't even remember what month it was, but I know this was sometime during the summer. My parents were gone for the weekend, so I was spending the 2 days alone doing whatever. Mostly cycling between watching YouTube, gaming, and grabbing snacks from the kitchen. So I was in my room upstairs 99% of the time, with headphones on. I think being a teen, it was nice to just sit in my room and do whatever I wanted without being bothered. At some point while I was gaming though, I started hearing voices. At first, I thought a video had started playing in the background, but when I checked YouTube, everything was paused. So then I took my headphones off, and that's when I noticed the voices were coming from outside. I had my bedroom window slightly cracked open, so I could hear just the muffled sound of someone speaking. It was raining outside too, which made it more difficult. They had to be close though, like near the outside walls of the house. Couldn't tell what they were saying, or if they were talking to someone else. I only heard what sounded like one voice. By the time I had gotten up from my chair and walked over to the window to get a closer listen, they had stopped talking. I decided to head downstairs and try looking out some of the other windows to see if they were still around, because honestly, someone walking that close to the house at 8 p.m. was pretty weird. Seemed like whoever it was gone already though, because I couldn't see any sign of them when I got downstairs. I took the opportunity to grab a bag of chips from the kitchen, then headed back up to my room. Must have been up there gaming for an hour, but it went by really fast. I was in the middle of a round, and suddenly heard a voice from outside my headset. Even mid-game and with the headphones on, the voice was much more clear than what I was hearing earlier. Not necessarily louder, but far less muffled, and I could have sworn I knew what he said. I quickly took off my headset and listened. The house was quiet and creaky as I waited for 15 seconds before I heard the voice again.
Luke!
The man called my nickname. My full name was Lucas, but I always went by Luke with my buddies, and that's what he was calling out. I didn't recognize this man's voice though, and more importantly, I was almost positive his voice was coming from below me, like inside the house below me. I quietly laid my headset on the desk, got up and walked up to the bedroom door. I did my best to open it very quietly, not to let it creak or make any noise. Just when I opened it, he yelled my name again. Though yelled isn't the right word. He was calling it out, but almost softly. It was like when you call out someone's name just to ask them something. Very calm and friendly. In the context of whoever this man was breaking into my home, it only added to how disturbing the whole thing was. His voice had this gravelly sound to it. Sounded like he had to be mid-50s with a life full of smoking. As he said my name again, I was able to confirm that he was definitely inside the house, and probably right around the bottom of the staircase. I backed up and left the door open, scared to close it and make noise, with him being so close. I then went to the back window and pushed it further open, then carefully stepped out onto the roof and closed it as much as I could without letting it latch shut. It wasn't a full roof. It was actually the overhang to the front porch, and it just happened to be right outside my window, making a kind of 3 or 4 foot wide sloped ledge that I could stand or sit on. Definitely not the safest, especially being wet and slippery from the rain, but I didn't have much of a choice, unless I wanted to hide in the bedroom and probably get found before cops could make it. And that's when I realized I f***ed up. I left my phone on my desk. I was too worried about getting out to even think about it. I moved back toward the window and prepared to go back in and get it. But just as I peered into the room, I saw a shadow through the doorway coming down the hall outside my room. I quickly moved back out of sight. My heart was pounding. Few seconds later, I heard some things shuffling around in my room, and then the man call my name again.
Luke.
That creepy, soft tone. I peered over just a little bit so I could partially see the room. All I saw was his shadow on the wall, moving around and looking at my desk, probably seeing I had a game opened, and was in the process of figuring out I had to be somewhere nearby still. I really wanted to look around a little further to get a glimpse of who he was, but I couldn't risk getting caught. I started getting that sixth sense gut feeling that I was about to be found out, so I acted fast, moving to the farthest point of the ledge. Under me was nothing but a small bush and some grass. It was maybe an 8 to 10 foot drop. I sort of dangled off first, then let go, hitting my legs on the ground and falling back. It was painful, but didn't break anything. I got up and ran for the nearest neighbor. Honestly, I don't know how others in these stories I listen to do it, because in my case, I couldn't get anyone to answer the door and help me. I mean, it was the middle of the night, and they probably thought I was some lunatic trying to get them to open the door and let me in. It still ended up working though, because one of the houses called the police on me for banging on their door, which I was then able to explain to the officer my situation. I had no way to know how long I was out there for. My guess is 20 minutes before the cop came by. The man in my home was gone, but the officer also found the window in my room fully open. The guy had checked out on the ledge at some point after I left. It made my heart sink, knowing how close I was. In the following days, my legs swelled up from the jump, but ultimately had no lasting injuries. Crazy to think that decision actually might have saved my life, or prevented whatever sick plans that intruder had in mind. I think it'll always haunt the back of my mind though, knowing I was so close to seeing who the man was, and yet I didn't. Kinda wish I risked it and looked. But it's easy for me to say now, while I'm not actively in a life-threatening situation. As far as me and my family are aware, the guy never came back and never followed up on anything. I'm much older now, so I don't think anything will ever come from it, and hopefully it stays that way. I work as security for a small office space in town. Even after this happened, I still decided to keep the job, as I couldn't find anything else with better pay. Trust me, I'll be leaving as soon as I can though. Part of the reason I got the job, and I didn't mind it, was that the office space was part of a large business district, or office park, that was in the middle of a fairly wealthy part of town. Really, I couldn't see any way people would actually try breaking into one of these places, as they had to know in a wealthier area like this, there would be security, if not in person, at least through cameras and monitoring systems. Anyway, I clocked in at 10 p.m., doing my first quick rounds of the place to activate all the detection systems, then headed into the security office. It was more of a closet, to be honest. No windows or anything, so not a fun place to be. If I could help it, I like to walk around pretty often. I was only supposed to get up and walk around every hour, including a perimeter walk of the building. But I did it more frequently, because watching the cameras and systems and stuff was really a drag. However, this night, it was pouring down a little too hard to be walking around outside. So I was stuck inside, walking the hallways. One thing to mention is that the cameras always fogged up, every time it rained, which made all the outdoor ones nearly useless. Just 30 minutes into my shift, there was an alert on the monitor. It detected motion from one of the cameras on the front of the building. I checked it and could barely see anything, though it did look like there might have been someone standing outside the front door. I could just see a little bit of movement. So I headed out of the office and down to the first story. All I was gonna do was go out there and see what the guy wanted, or if there even was a guy there. But when I opened the door and looked out, he wasn't there. Still just a rainy mess outside, and no one in sight. I closed the door and reset the alarm. Very strange for anyone to be out here tonight. Maybe he had the wrong building. Regardless, it looked like he left, so I tried not to bother with it. I went back up to the office. I was only sitting down for another 5-ish minutes before I heard a phone ringing. Not the security phone on my desk. It sounded like it was coming from a floor below, in one of the offices. Annoyed, I got up and walked down there, but by then it had already rung through. I waited a few minutes, and almost like I predicted it, they called again. I followed the sound into a seemingly typical office room. Bunch of desks lined up in rows, with the main overhead lights off. But right in the middle, there was a small glowing light from a phone on one of the desks. I walked up to it. It said unknown caller. I found it extremely odd that a random phone on one of the office desks was ringing. Why this specific one, and not the reception desk phone that was linked to the company? How did anyone even have the specific office phone number and extension? I wanted to answer and ask who was calling. I mean, the mystery of it was hard to ignore, but it wasn't my business to be answering random phone calls. Probably could have gotten in trouble for it if someone found out I did. So I left it. I didn't know how to put the thing on silent, so for the next hour, I'd constantly hear the damn thing ringing below me as I sat upstairs in the security room. At 1 a.m., I got up and did a quick walkthrough of the office, just the usual rounds. It only took 10 minutes, and then I was back at the security desk. But I didn't even get to sit down when I heard a thump resonate through the building. It echoed like it was from the hollow stairwell, or possibly a hallway. Scared the hell out of me. I checked the system and saw nothing interesting, so then I ran down to the first floor to recheck the doors that I'd just checked. I felt a bit of shock as I approached the front door and noticed a blinking green light on the alarm system. It was put on pause, basically disarming this specific door. Even I never did that. I only turned it on or off, never on pause. Feeling a bit of tension, I pushed open the door and looked outside. Still pouring, and still nobody out there. I closed and relocked the door. Something really strange was going on this night, and it was the first time since getting this gig that I'd actually been uneasy. I had no idea what was going on. I started to hurry back up the stairwell, hoping if I looked over the system again, it would give me some sort of answers. I got to the 3rd story when I stopped right on the stairs. The door was open, the one leading to the 3rd floor office hallway, which was also where the phone had been ringing from earlier. I carefully stepped up to it, not hearing a single thing, as I approached and looked out into the hallway. And then everything went black. My sight, hearing, probably whole consciousness just cut out for a split second. When I was back, I was completely dazed and in the middle of stumbling backward. And even though I blacked out for a moment, I knew instantly that I'd been hit in the back of the head. As my whole body was fighting to stay awake, I fell down a few steps in the stairwell and saw the blurry outline of someone standing in the doorway. I immediately got to my feet and stumbled down the rest of the steps, ears ringing and head throbbing as I managed to make it out of the building. I used the work phone on my belt to quick dial 911. I hid behind my car in the downpour as I waited for them to get there. I was so out of it, I couldn't tell you how long I waited for. They didn't find anyone in the building. I was taken to the hospital and treated for a pretty bad concussion, but was otherwise okay. While it might seem like just a regular break-in, a lot of things added up to make it feel more, professional, I guess. They did it on a rainy night when the camera lenses were fogged over. And assuming it was them calling, they knew a specific office worker's phone number that wasn't available to the public. And most convincing is they knew how that exact security system worked and how to disengage it so they could get in unnoticed. Seems too coincidental to be some nobody breaking in on a whim. The dude hit me so hard too, I couldn't even make out anything but a blurry image of him. So I had no description to give the police. All this being said, I know I won't be getting any answers. I've still been working there, months after this happened, and the company hasn't told me anything. Nothing about if anything was stolen, or if they knew who it was, or even what he broke in for. Nothing at all. It's really odd, and I'm still in the process of looking for a new gig. But until then, I'm gonna be way more aware of any strange things going on at this office. A few months ago, me and my buddy Thomas were hanging out at my place for the evening. Neither of us worked the next day, so we were just chilling and having some beers. Honestly, we weren't planning to hang out for that long, but by the time it was 10 p.m., I offered Thomas to sleep on the couch if he wanted, which was actually a pretty common occurrence. He still lived with his folks, so hanging at my place was his way of getting some space. Anyway, we made plans for tomorrow morning as well, and the whole thing turned into planning to have a pretty cool day tomorrow. But since Thomas didn't bring any extra clothes or anything, and before he drank too much, he drove back to his place real quick to grab some stuff. That way we can drink some more when he got back, and he'd have stuff for tomorrow. Obviously, he could have stayed home since he was going back anyway, but like I said, he preferred hanging at my place. The drive was only 5 minutes, so I just hung back and waited. I was gonna stay out on the porch, but somehow I'd never noticed the massive storm going on outside, so I went back in and just waited on the couch. I was scrolling on my phone and sipping on my beer, not really watching the time, but at some point, say 15 or 20 minutes later, a knock finally came at the front door. I quickly got up and casually opened the door for him, but nearly dropped my glass when I was startled by it not being Thomas. It was just some guy, wearing almost all black and dripping wet. I swear the man looked so creepy. There was no chance in hell, even being drunk, that I would have ever opened the door for him. Normally, I would have checked first too, if I hadn't been expecting Thomas. And with the crazy storm out, what was this guy even doing? Before I could get a word out, the man put one foot in the doorway and looked in at me. He'd clearly been out in the rain for hours, though he had a tired look masked over his whole face. I reached back for the door and said sorry, that I thought he was someone else. He kept his foot in the doorway though, and just smiled. I started to close the door, and he still didn't get the hint, keeping his foot right there in the doorway. It was incredibly weird and also awkward, because for a good 4 or 5 seconds, we just stood there. He didn't say anything, and I was too drunk to think of anything to say. And then he finally moved his foot and took a step back, still smiling as I closed the door. Immediately, I went back to the couch and sent Thomas a text to watch out for the creep lurking outside the door. Honestly, it was more of a joke text, though. After getting the door closed and everything, I thought it was so ridiculous that it was kind of funny. Maybe I had a few too many drinks. I waited a decent amount of time, definitely longer than it should have taken him to be back. I thought it could have been the storm making things take a while, but when I went up to the window and looked out to check on the storm, I saw Thomas's car was back, parked on the curb. Confused, I went to the front door and opened it, but Thomas wasn't there. I stood in the doorway, looking out into the rain for a minute, but it was clear Thomas wasn't around. His car was parked and off, and I didn't see any movement in there, so he definitely wasn't still sitting inside. I pulled my phone out and called his cell. Right away, a light lit up in his car. It was certainly his phone, and it lit up enough for me to see clearly that he was not inside. Now I was worried. I walked out into the rain to the bottom of the driveway and looked around. I called out his name, but it was so loud outside, I knew it was useless. Somehow, it wasn't until I got utterly soaked by the rain that I remembered the creepy man that was outside the house before. I started to think he might have had something to do with this. Getting a really overwhelming feeling about this whole thing, I ran back inside, closing and locking the door behind me. As I took my shoes off, I quickly felt that something else was wrong. I looked up, and the main hallway was dark. Like really dark, as if none of the lights were on back there. Could have sworn I'd left them all on, or at least a couple of lights. I slowly walked down to the end of the hallway. The storm going on outside the walls, along with the calm quietness of inside the house, was making it way more tense than I was comfortable with. I got to the end and looked around. All the rooms were dark, but right along the side of the wall, the faintest outline of someone was standing there, pressed up to the wall like they were trying to stay out of sight. I must have looked at them for a little too long though, because after a couple of seconds, the man moved with confidence and stepped toward me. He was holding one of his arms up and had something in his hand, and at the time I didn't look long enough to see what it was before running. I used every muscle in my body to run as fast as possible out the front door and as far away as I could. I hid in some random house's front porch and called the police. From there, I could sort of see through the rain to the front of my house. So a few minutes later, when cops showed up, I watched as two officers calmly walked up to the front door before suddenly raising their guns and sprinting inside. I guess they saw the guy still in the hallway and chased him out the back door, but they said he jumped the fence and they lost him in the storm. I ran over and told them everything, and they immediately started searching for Thomas, and thankfully found him after only 5 minutes. He was locked inside a car parked down the road, tied up in everything. Turned out the man creeping outside my house held Thomas at gunpoint as soon as he pulled up to the house. And then, after forcing him to get into the car down the road, he came back to the house and broke in through the back while I was looking for Thomas, presumably trying to do the same thing to me. Which means when I saw him holding his arm up, he was holding a gun pointed right at me. Had it not been too dark, and had I seen what it was, I probably wouldn't have even risked running away, which would have left both me and Thomas at the mercy of this insane man. Anyway, the car the guy was using was stolen earlier that night, so it was a dead end, and the guy was completely lost to the storm. No traces whatsoever. We have no clue what he intended, or why he did any of it.